Welcome to the Business Spotlight Series. My name's Mark McNulty, and I'm president of Action Coach Bluegrass. And today I have with me Kyle Lake, who is the CEO and executive producer at Prosper Media Group. Welcome, Kyle.
Good to be here, Mark.
Great. So today we're going to be talking with Kyle about his business, his journey to business ownership, and some of the challenges, best practices that he is willing to share with us, and then share a peek into what it's really like to own a business. Now, if this is your first time on our channel, be sure to like and subscribe so you get notifications when new interviews just like this get dropped. So Kyle, welcome again, and thanks for being here today.
I'm excited. I think this will be a lot of fun, Mark. It's the holiday season. It's crazy chaos as usual, and we're just taking a minute to talk a little shop.
Yeah. And as you mentioned before we started, you're on the other side of the interview this time.
Absolutely. That's kind of fun. I think we'll see how it goes. I may be better doing the other way, but we'll give it a shot.
You can let me know when we're done. So to get us started, tell our listeners, a little bit about your background and then, how that turned into Prosper Media Group.
So just to keep it brief, I've been doing this now for about 25 years or so, give or take. And, I guess I kind of got into this like a lot of people do, or at least finding your passion, which was at a young age, back in the day when technology was still way different than it is now, playing around with home movie cameras and patching two VCRs together with stereo equipment and making videos and doing things like that kind of was always a lot of fun. Always enjoyed movies and TV and writing, doing a lot of writing and things as a young person and trying to be published and things like that. So I was always into the creative genre. Didn't know, honestly, through high school if that was something I was going to do. In fact, when I left high school and started college, I was pre-med of all things, and did that for about a year and realized I didn't want to go to school that long, and chemistry was not my best friend. So switched over, did a 180 and went into the television and film production studies, I guess. And that was when, I guess, a year or two into that is when I started this company. Was in undergrad while I was at the College of New Jersey. And it was, at that point, was kind of just an umbrella organization to kind of help all our fellow students coordinate shoots, to recruit crew or talent for their projects, and just kind of a fun name. I don't know what it was, but we produced a weekly show on campus and did some independent film projects and things like that up there. And then afterwards, fast forward, I did some projects that actually paid me $1 or $2. But when you get out of college, you find out all of a sudden you don't have the free crew and you don't have the free equipment. And this is an expensive business to get into when it comes to finding equipment and technology and all that stuff. So it was a slow go, but did manage to do some things and get $1 or $2 here for them. And then ended up relocating, moving back to my home state, which is Kentucky, and doing a graduate program here in Lexington. And then shortly after finishing that was when I said, you know what, let's try this media thing, this video production thing full time. And that was 2004, 5, something give or take, right around there, and incorporated in the Kentucky and just kind of started to build a client base and do some things. And it was a very slow go, but it went. And we've had a lot of fun ever since.
Right. So like a lot of media companies, you do a lot of things, like media and video is a pretty broad. So what are your primary products and services that you offer?
Sure. And of course, starting out, you'll do anything someone will pay you for, but then you eventually learn to hone your skills and find the things that not only that you are good at, but that you enjoy, and you focus on those. And I think for us, we kind of have two different divisions really with what we do. We have a corporate kind of work that we perform, and then we have our television work. The television work is kind of our fun outlet, our creative outlet. It's not something that I would say is a big time paying the bills project, but it's great marketing for us, great exposure, and it also allows our crew and team to kind of have some fun and do some really creative things. And we've received some accolades for those. So that's been fun. And we've done that since 2011 independently, producing content for PBS affiliate KET here in Kentucky, and then distributing around the world now as of this year. So that's one end of it. The other end is the corporate. And on that end, it's going to be more of your training videos, your promotional videos, marketing, things like that. And we run the gauntlet across different types of clients, large and small, local and national, nonprofits, things like that. And just amazing stories that I've had over 20 years here now in Lexington of the different groups we've worked with. And that's been very lucrative. And we found kind of our niche with being able to provide a very cost-efficient product for our clients that they can utilize. And hopefully what we do is we want to have a long shelf life, be evergreen, but also we save their projects. So if they want to come back and edit something and revisit, they don't have to reinvent the wheel, trying to keep something going. Our idea is to build a relationship. We want a long-term relationship with a client. And that's kind of where we've gone now, is more of those long-term relationships for the work we do.
Right. So as technology has evolved, video and AI are the two things coming out, and they go together, very well or very poorly, depending on your perspective. It can be used or misused. But how have you seen the use of video evolve in the business sphere, particularly?
Oh gosh, it really has evolved. I feel like, it's always been there, but it always, at least when I started out, it was, if you wanted to go professional with this, it was always out there. It was like you had to really grasp. The technology was very expensive and it was very big. Literally, it was big. You had big tapes, you had big equipment. In college, we had a camera, and then we had a bag that had the VTR, that you carried around with you. Everything was big and everything was very expensive. I think what I've seen, at least on that end, is that it's a little more accessible now because of the technology. Things are smaller, literally, as far as the size of the equipment, but also the price tags are a little smaller, and there's more of it out there. It was very tough getting out there because if you didn't have a beta set up and you wanted to go to a TV station with a commercial, you had to go somewhere and convert it if you weren't filming up beta. I have racks of little mini DV digital tapes that we used, and that wasn't even what we started with in college. That was right at the end of college and afterwards. So still tape. And then we switched to the big game changer, in my opinion, was when things really went digital and you started storing on cards, and SD cards. Now they have tiny little cards you can put things on. And we've got 4K and 6K and 8K. So it's drastically changed in the last 10 to 12 years with that happening and made it a little more accessible for everybody, I think. As far as the client end of things, they appreciate video more. When I started in this, it was still, there was a need for it. Places would have it, but it was like, oh, it's a commercial, or we're going to do a training video and put it on a tape. Now it's a communication tool. Now it's used for team building. Now it's very much used for training, but it needs to be interactive. It needs to be engaging. We use the term infotainment when we talk about our projects with clients. We want our client process to be fun throughout. People don't want to do video when you talk about the client end because it's a lot of work on the pre-production side. And if you can make the process fun for them, they'll continue to do it because it works. I mean, it definitely works. I think the big hiccup is that, at least on our end, we need you to tell us what you want and we'll produce it. And it's very hard. It's not as fun for them to have to sit down and go through those things. So making that process more fun has been a big factor in how we've been able to be successful with it.
Okay. So what's the hidden mystery, or what's the big unknown about Prosper that you wish all the businesses out there knew about you?
Oh gosh, secret sauce? I can't tell you. No, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that there's a super mystery for us. I think for us, one of the things that we've been able to do is really focus in on that relationship with the client. We have clients that been with us for 10 plus years that are almost like family. They are our team. We're all a team now. We come in, it's like these are our guys. And that's been a big part of it, is developing that relationship and that trust. I think that's been a big factor for us because we are smaller. We're also very nimble. We can flex. We can do things that the big guys can't as far as budget and timing on things and provide that service. So that's been a big plus for us as well, I would say, throughout the years, especially as of recent. That's one of our big things. But that relationship with the client has been something that, when I take on a project with a client and meet with them, especially a new one, or even an existing client that has a new video they want, I ask a few questions up front. And if they can't answer those, then we're not ready to do a video. And one of them is, who's your audience? And the second one's, how are they going to see it? And if they don't have answers to those two questions, we're not ready. Because you can spend a lot of money and a lot of time on a video, but if you don't know who it's directed towards or how they're going to see it, then you might as well throw it in the fire.
So tell me about your team. I mean, you've got a small team, but I've been on your website. You've got a lot of experience on your team.
We do. Our team, I've been fortunate to have a few people with me for several years. One in particular is my other television producer and super editor. We've been over 12 years now, I think, at least. Maybe he'd probably say 15. I don't know. It's been a while. We've had a great relationship doing work together for the years, and everything from the TV to the corporate videos. We have another couple of shooters and another couple of editors that we work with, but typically a primary editor and a secondary editor that will do projects. And then the same thing with the filming. Kind of depends on the project. Some projects dictate more crew on there, depending on what they're doing. And then others may, you may be able to send one person out to do it. So we are able to flex with that, which makes a big difference. I've worked with some great folks over the years. Some of them, we tend to get a lot of the younger people. We find folks out of college, maybe a year or two. Typically, we try to find between 2 and 5 years after college, just for the experience level. But this is a good spot for them to come in, hone what they've learned, learn about how to put together things on a timeline, a schedule, versus the college format, which is, yeah, you've got one video to do for a semester. Now you've got to do that video in 6 days. You know what I mean? So here, it's big difference for that. And that being said, we also do have a pretty good internship program that we've been doing since pretty much the beginning of incorporating here in Kentucky, and bringing in students from the different colleges in the Bluegrass region to hone those skills. And one of the things I tell our interns is, this isn't something you're not gonna run coffee for me. I make good coffee. I can do it. You're gonna do work. You're gonna actually put your hands on real projects and do things with the tutelage of us, our team here. But it's real stuff. And if you don't know how to do the things, if college hasn't taught you how to use the software or the cameras, then this isn't the place for you. That's not what we do. We let you put that to work, put it on your resume, put your name on a TV show, those type things. So it's a competitive internship, but when I look at LinkedIn and find the folks that have interned with us over these last 20 years, it's fun to see where all they've landed. Some of them land with us, some of them go off, some of them stay local, some of them move, but that's been a real fun part of what we do. And we do 2 tracks, a marketing PR track, which kind of deals with social media and all those terrible things that I don't want to deal with. And then also with obviously the video production.
Okay, awesome. So thinking about your business, when you came out of school and, 2004, you said, I'm just going to start a company that does this. So thinking back then, where you could have been just a contract to other people, right? But I'm going to start a business and do this. What were some of the hurdles and or hiccups to starting out?
Well, I mean, obviously, some of the hurdles are you have to have the equipment to do this work. So being able to procure that smartly and not get yourself into trouble with spending and things like that. And then the other end of it is obviously procuring clients, finding clients. And I would say that's a bigger issue than probably the equipment. You can find the equipment. There's ways to get stuff and kind of build that up. But you do want to make sure that you've found good clients along the way, and as you grow, you need to find good team members to help do these things. I eventually figured out that, all right, I have to find people better at this than me when it comes to editing or shooting. That's how it works, because as an owner, you start to evolve to different things. My role from being an editor and a shooter started to evolve into client management, client acquisition, business development, technology, all those type things, more of the administrative stuff, but a lot of it, the relationships and quality control. So you do need to find those team members that are able to go ahead and do the editing and do the filming and help with those type things. So that was not a problem initially because it was too small. It was me doing a lot of the things. But I think client acquisition was always something that, you get to this time of the year, it's the end of the year, and you're like, oh, what's the next year going to be like? Who are we going to work with? Who are we going to find to do these things? That was always something that when you're a small business owner, I think people that don't own their own businesses or run things, they don't appreciate that. They don't get it. The folks that go in and they clock in or they're on salary or whatever, they come home and it's done. That part of it, making sure you have the work for the people you've hired to do and that you can do payroll and buy the equipment and do those things, that never leaves. That's always there. Even when things are good, we've been very fortunate, always on an uptick as far as making money goes. But even then, if I have 2 or 3 weeks that gets slow, I start to get antsy, and I've learned as I've gotten older to kind of like, what, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to chill. I've gotten better at that. But it doesn't take long before I start saying, all right, let's get out the software and start following up with people and find out what's going on, and continuing to develop that business.
So were you the natural born salesman, or did you have to go learn how to sell?
No, I hate sales. There's only one thing I hate more than sales, and that's finding sponsors for the television programming, which is way worse because that's like, hey, can you just give us money? We want to do a TV show. Very difficult on that one, although we've been able to do it, but that falls on me to do those things, and it definitely is something that slows how we're not going to go out and do 20 shows in a season kind of thing because it's a lot of work. But the sales part of it is probably one of my least favorite parts. I do enjoy, they call people hunters and farmers. I would say I'm much more of a farmer than I am a hunter. I can hunt and I can do it, but I'd rather farm. I'd rather develop the relationships. We have been fortunate to be able to be found and contacted. A lot of us, this isn't a cold calling business or something, luckily, where it's just call people and say, hey, can you do this? The sales cycle, at least for a lot of videos that we do, is very long. We want something that's a fairly decent budget, but it's not that you can just call somebody and they say, oh yeah, you know what? I do need one. Let's get on that tomorrow. I've had projects that have gone over a year before they finally got up and said, hey, let's go ahead and do this. So that it is a long sales cycle. So you do have to make sure that you've got enough folks in queue to make sure that you stay busy.
Mm-hmm. So, a few years ago, we had a big event, COVID. How did COVID impact your business?
COVID was, like for everyone, I think, was scary. For small businesses, no matter what type of industry you're in, it seemed like it was a very scary thing. It was more scary for some than others. For us, what happened with it was that we did have one of our larger clients that had to, they didn't lay people off, they furloughed folks, and they furloughed the people department that we actually worked with. And so we were waiting for that call, and they were one of our big ones. And that was going to be a big hurt for us. And to our luck, I guess to what our abilities and what they thought of us, they didn't cut us. They cut us down, but instead of, and I was like, wow, you can actually, you may furlough some of your employees, but you're going to keep us on board. That was a big statement to us of our importance, even though we didn't have anything to do for them. They wanted to keep us going. So that was a big moment. Kind of gave you that little bit of relief, but we also realized how many clients we worked with that did things like events. When we work with the local minor league baseball team or, high school football rivalries and nonprofits that have things like that. And when all that stuff shuttered, we were like, wow, uh-oh, looking at the budgets, like these things are gone, this year anyways. So it was a little bit of panic, that April and May, it was scary. But what happened was all of a sudden video became very important because everything became virtual. Zoom was not heard of except for when COVID happened. We worked with the local school district here to do virtual videos for their entire graduation of every high school in Fayette County. So that was a big deal, So, and then we had other clients that were doing virtual conferences and they needed video for all of it. So all of a sudden we got crazy, by June, July that year, and it ended up being fine. And not only did we maybe find some new clients, but we ended up being in a great place. In fact, it was a situation where, okay, who's going to do the work? Again, finding the people there and the teammates. So, but it was scary. It made things different when you're doing production, wearing masks and things like that. You're out there. We do have to go out and film the things. So we were having to be out there and, with all the PPE and all that, everything to be safe with things. So it's a learning experience. I'm glad it's over, but it was kind of fun to come into the studio though, because driving to work, no traffic, no worries, it was and I would come in every day, it'd be completely empty in our building, but it was kind of an interesting thing to wear pajamas to work and not have to worry about anything, but definitely scary there initially because it was an unknown.
Mm-hmm. Good. I'm glad you were able to work through that. And the Zoom things. I'm one of the weird people. I've been using Zoom forever.
Okay.
Yeah. In 2020, all of a sudden there was a crowd.
Yep.
And I taught a lot of people how to use Zooms because I'd been using it for years in my coaching, remote coaching. So I remember Zoom back when nobody else used it.
Well, and it changed, one of the things I saw with it in our end with the technology was that it did change things. COVID ended, well, mostly, but that phase of it with the shutdowns has ended. But, a lot of the things that happen then are still being done. So you do see more virtual things. I do see a little less events. I don't know that it's, psychologically is a great thing that, we've lost the interpersonal relationships of in-person meetings and events, but that's another story. But, we have seen more of it. We have a client right now that's doing their conference, not because of COVID, but because they're going to do it virtual this year, so I'm sure some of the things they learned, in fact, I know because we produced the videos for it, that they learned during COVID, they're able to put into place now for that. So it's very interesting.
So, thinking out in the next 3 to 5 years, where do you see video in the business world enhancing and enabling, being an enabler for small, medium-sized businesses to grow? And how do you see it fitting into their plans, or how should they be thinking about incorporating it into their plans?
Well, it really, in my experience, it does depend on what the business is, what type of business it is, first of all. And then I go back to those questions of them, who is their audience and how are they going to see it? Those are the big things there. But, taking that into account, again, it's a communications tool. Everybody's using it. So whether you're doing communications internally with your team and a training component or team building or informational delivery, it's more efficient and it's cheaper. If you're going to fly in, let's say you're a company that's 100 people, but they're in all 4 corners of the US. Flying them in, putting them in hotels to sit in a conference room and go through things is expensive and honestly not necessarily that effective. If you put a video to that and create it and spend the money for that, not only are you probably going to come out cheaper as far as your expense, but you have something you can continue to use. And that's what people forget. It keeps going. You do a meeting, it's done. Unless somebody's sitting in the back with a camcorder, and that's pretty bad. No one wants to watch one of those. People have hired us to do that. We don't like doing it. We want to produce it. Sitting in there and filming a meeting is boring and no one wants to watch that. But if you produce a video and then use it, people will watch it. It takes half the time to do the training usually, if the pre-production is correct. So it's less time out of the day for your team. It's less expense for moving people in. And it's something, the biggest part, in my opinion, is that it's evergreen. Continue to use it. It's not a one and done. So I think that's a big thing. Marketing wise, it's a wild world out there with marketing, with social media and everything going on with that. I don't even do personal social media anymore. I'm kind of over it. I hate it. I leave that to the interns, the young folks. They educate me on a lot of those things. We do work with clients, especially tourism throughout Kentucky, and do a lot of marketing for those guys. And social media is a main delivery point for them. So, making sure not only that you've got the right distribution formats, but you need to follow, what's the link that's going to work for people, and who are you, again, back to that audience and how they're going to see it. So marketing is a wild beast. There's just so many different components to it that there weren't before. When you had marketing before, you had paper and print, you had outdoor, you had radio, and you had TV. And now you got this wide open internet space and app space and mobile space, plus all those other ones. Now some of the older traditional ones are dying out, but they're still there. So it's definitely a wild animal out there for sure. But the same thing goes with those, is if you can make something that they can continue to use and say, hey, here's a long form we're going to put on YouTube, and then we're going to slice that up so you can use it on your Instagram and your Facebook and your other apps or whatever you're going to do, plus embed it on your website. Then we like do multiple use for things. That way it's really reaching multiple audiences and it's a lot more flexible with how you use it and more bang for your buck.
Yeah. I like what you said about the evergreen nature, especially of the internal videos used for communication. I've used it for training, and that makes it easy. I only have to do that training once. But, if I do a nice professional recording of it, I don't have to redo that again. But as just an information sharing, hadn't really thought about that as much. Telling the story of the business for new employees or new clients or both, right? So the evergreen nature of that's the different way of looking at it for me. So that really helps a lot. So awesome. Going back to your business, the 3 to 5 years, where do you see Prosper in 3 to 5 years? Anything different that you can share?
I don't know. Technology is always the wild card in that. You don't know what it's going to do. AI is something that's on the radar. I think the trick with AI, at least at this part of the game, is that there are some tools that we can utilize with AI to streamline our processes. to not only make it more affordable for our clients, but also maybe more efficient. So looking at that as options is important, but staying true to journalistic integrity. We are pretty big on, we want to shoot it. I don't want something that's created from a computer out there, as far as a video or whatever. People can do it, but I think the learning curve is pretty strong on it for a lot of these clients, smaller businesses. They can play with it, but what ends up happening is next thing they know, they've wasted 2 weeks and doing something that they could have had done in 1 week probably, or less, or maybe even a day or two. So I think it's kind of new. It's kind of fun right now. I think there's some dangers with it. I do think that there's going to be a lot of very happy attorneys out there with lawsuits that are going to come from content used without permission for things. You think of AI and it's just a robust, really robust search engine. Google comes along and it's like, oh, we got all this information all in the world. Let's go organize it and we'll be zillionaires. And that's what happened. Well, now we're taking that to the next level where we're taking the information and we're doing things with it. We're building with it, So it's not creating new things. Technically, it can only generate what's already out there and then mix and match those things to make new things, but it's not original. So I think you still have that originality that you get from what we do. And, like anything else, some people are going to see through the AI. I already do. We have people ask me all the time, what do you do about AI? And I have one of my board members talk to me about it the other day. And I said, hey, are you worried about it? I said, no. I said, honestly, when I do a customer service call, I can automatically tell when it's an AI thing, and I said, and usually I click right over, I need a representative. But I said, this day and age, I've had so many bad live people with inaccurate information. I kind of am all about AI. If they can get it right and get it done quickly, let's give it a go. You know what I mean? So, I think there's different ways to look at it. I was kind of really down on it initially, and now it's like, well, let's sit back and see what happens. But for us, 3 to 5 years, that's something out there. I don't think that's going to impact what we do at all. I think, like I said, it may make our world a little easier on efficiencies in some manners, but with the type work we do and the type of clients that we want, we're still going to be there to do those things. There will be some technology that pops up. One of the things we're doing a lot with now is the 360 VR space. We do a lot of virtual tours for tourism, even for corporate clients, buildings and industry and factories, where we can come in there and we can create a virtual environment and then embed videos in there that can be used for training or promotion or just, we've got a group that says, hey, we spend all this money to onboard new clients. If you do a virtual tour of this space and do all this stuff in here, we don't have to onboard them all the time. We still can, but even after that, again, the evergreen, if they want to go back and revisit, they just go here and they're right there, like they're in person. So stuff like that, I think, is very fun. Me personally, I geek out on it, and we've done a lot with that, and it's been pretty fun to see. So a lot of cool stuff that's out there, I think.
Okay, awesome. All right, so last few questions here. We've covered a lot of ground, and especially on just different ways to use video in business and how business owners can, use that as a best practice. So now it's just really your thoughts based on your experience for other business owners. So first question, so what's been your key to success?
There's always a lot of keys to success, but the first word that would pop into my mind if I had to say something, especially to the younger folks looking at starting businesses in this world of instant gratification, mine would be persistence.
Okay.
I think being able to be resilient and persistent and to adapt and flex. You do need to pivot every once in a while with things. You don't have to give up, but you do have to pivot a lot. So, persistence would be the big thing, I would say.
Okay, awesome. That's mine as well. That's always the first word out of my mouth is, if you don't have that, it's going to be tough. So what's one piece of advice you would have for other business owners?
One piece, besides being persistent, you could, the opposite of being persistent is know when to give it up. But I think that if you believe in something and you have a passion for it and you're good at it, the advice would be that you don't have to give it up, but you do need to know your market. And you need to know who's going to pay for this. Something I always tell the kids that graduate from college, the same thing I did, which was, sometimes you got to get a job that's going to pay the bills. It's not what you want to do. I was a treasury agent for 2 years before I did this, before I went to grad school and then started this full time. So I said, you've got to pay the bills, but keep doing what you like, because eventually if you're good enough at it and you do it well, you'll be paid to do it. And then you can pivot to that and do that full time, which is what I did. So I think that that would be the advice is don't give up on it. Keep working at it, volunteer, do it for free. The gentleman that I mentioned who's worked with me for all these years, he came in, he's already finished with college. He wanted to do an internship. I said, well, our internship's for credit. You're already finished with school. He said, I just want to hone my skills. He was working at Walgreens at the time.
Okay.
And then next thing you know, we had to hire him, and he's been with us ever since. And he's working for, a large broadcast affiliate as well, heading up their creative services too. So great success story, but I think that's the key is that, you jump out there in this field, it's very tough to do it. It beats you down. This is an industry too, even if you are doing it well. It was what my TV1 professor told me when I was a kid in college. He says, the burnout's ridiculous. He says, you got to be able to sell your grandmother for a nickel in this industry. Now, he was talking more television, not necessarily corporate video, but the burnout is real. You do deal with a lot of different moving parts. You have to deal with a lot of personalities, both clients and team, and you have to deal with deadlines and budgets, and it wear you down eventually. So take time for yourself too, every once in a while.
All right, good. So what's a book you're reading or listening to either now or recently that you would recommend to other business owners?
Oh, geez. I got into a little phase where I would read those type books. And since then, I have passed on to that phase. The books I read now are strictly for pleasure, and they're mostly fiction or historical. I really enjoy some of the historical biographies of different folks from the founding fathers to, Benjamin Franklin to Daniel Boone. I find that, I just read one on the frontier explorers. We mentioned persistence and resilience and things like that. And I think reading some of these biographies from some of these folks, and it doesn't just have to be American, it can be anywhere in the world. Mark Twain was a good one. That stuff is really gold. And I think you can learn a lot from that. And it's entertaining, at least to me. I'm a little bit of a history junkie, but I think it's entertaining. But there's a lot of great lessons. Best lessons are those you learn from others. Not necessarily the most, that don't stick with you always the best. Those hard lessons are the ones you always remember, but it's better to learn from others. And, even just Mark Twain's biography, which was great. He was an entrepreneur, and started things. And so those are fun. So if I had to recommend any books, I always think that those are really interesting to look at, and you can just pick any of them out of a hat. But the really old guys, when days were different before any technology and even electricity, are really entertaining in my opinion.
Okay, I like that. That's a good avenue on that. So before I ask you my last question, how do people find you?
If I'm good at what I do, they don't. No, I'm kidding. No, we're online everywhere. ProsperMediaGroup.com or Prosper Media at Prosper Media TV is our social media handles on things like Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. We do have our TV shows on our YouTube channel. LiquidKentucky.com is the site for our TV series. I am proud of our TV series Downstream. We're actually tomorrow finishing up production on our 20th episode, which will be a holiday themed episode here in Lexington. But that's a show all about Kentucky's liquids. So if you like bourbons, beers, and wines, or you like to paddle on rivers, lakes, or streams, that's your show. We combine both of those, and it's a fun one. So you can find things there, but just look online. We're around. Otherwise, we're right downtown on Main Street here in Lexington, Kentucky.
Right. So awesome. All right. So last question for you today, and that is this: what inspires you the most right now?
Right now, oh gosh, inspiration. It's a good question because I think that over the course of your career, with whatever you do, your inspirations do change. I don't think it's always the same thing. I think depending on where you're at in your life, that inspiration is changing all the time. I've been very fortunate to be blessed with many accolades and success here doing this thing on a very small level. We're a tiny little operation, but it has been successful and it's been fun. And I think that's the biggest thing I can say is that, when I get up in the morning, there's every once in a while it feels like a job, but a lot of times it doesn't. And that's a big deal. But right now, inspiration wise, I'm a dad now for the first time. I've got one. He'll be first time, probably the only one. I'm too old to have any more of these things, but he'll be 3 in January. And watching him kind of now get to that point where he's talking a lot and asking questions and doing things and really kind of mimicking and looking at what you do, that inspires me. because you just can't kind of the one. I don't know if he'll want to get into this stuff or not. Who knows? It would be neat, but I don't care if he does or not. I'm not saying he'll run this. I hope if I'm still doing it by the time he's able to run this, then I'm in trouble, But that inspires me. And along those lines, when we do have our student interns come in and I see somebody really stand out and really go that extra distance to learn and learn on their own and be creative and go the extra mile, that's very inspiring. And I guess I can say that now, getting a little older. I'm not old by any stretch, but older and maybe a minute or two wiser. Seeing those things has been very rewarding. So I think that's what inspires me now, is to think about, well, what is the next generation going to do? Whether they're going to take on this, maybe I hand the keys over to somebody like that down the road, or they start their own business or whatever. And watching my little Xander grow up and do creative things. I think that all is pretty fun and definitely inspires to keep on trucking.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, listeners, this has been Kyle Lake, who's the CEO and executive producer at Prosper Media Group. He has shared a ton of really good little nuggets throughout the course of this interview, his thoughts on video and uses of that media in your business and your life. So listen to this a couple times and pick out the nuggets that apply to you. Kyle, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate the questions and just chatting about some things.
Yeah, and I love where technology is going. I'm an ex-electronics guy who doesn't like new technology because I know what it does behind the curtain. So I'm always a slow adopter of new technology, but it is really exciting to see where technology is going, and video is really going to be at the forefront of that for the next several years and probably beyond, as we all figure out how to do that. And I appreciate all the ideas and the wisdom experience you shared with us today.
Oh, Mark, it's funny you mentioned that technology. When I was in college and I switched to communications, my part-time job while in college was at Best Buy. And this was 97, 98. Still new. We're Best Buys everywhere. In fact, we were the furthest northeast Best Buy. But I worked in the media department for a while, and I worked in the video department. So things all happen for a reason, I guess. But you got to see a lot of that technology, and it's fun to come full circle on those things.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks again, Kyle. Really appreciate it. And for all the listeners out there, thank you. And we will see you on the next interview. Bye.